to introduce Chelsea Green from Miami University, who actually was responsible for developing our Ethics Night at the Movies program that we have, where we show a couple movies to combined classes during this semester. So Chelsea?
Okay, hi. Karen, can you see my screen?
I can, it's perfect.
Great. Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I learned so much from Wanda and Karen when they speak. So, and from the discussion that we have. Wanda recommended that we come to this conference, and I hadn't been here, even though we're in Miami, which in Oxford, which is near Cincinnati. But I've really enjoyed the sessions that I've attended, and it's really kind of, for me, a different way of looking at some of the things that I think about. So it's been great. So I teach business law to students in our business school, and Karen does too. And we both teach a business law and ethics course to seniors, a capstone course. And I have found that the films do a great job of providing material for discussion. And I think it really opens their eyes to some of the things that we talk about in a different way than having them read articles. So one of the things that I believe is that context really matters when we're talking about law and ethics. And movies, documentaries provide so much rich context to decision making, and to as we read an article or a case, but seeing a movie related to it really gives it a rich texture. And so just some examples of how context matters. The first one I have here is jurisprudence, or judicial philosophy of law. When we're teaching law, we're often tweaking the facts of a scenario, because when you change some aspect of a fact pattern, you get a different outcome. And so that's a way of changing the context. And when you do that, it can change the decision making. So that's an example of how we use context in the classroom. It's also important as we bring in these contemporary legal philosophies, such as feminist theory and critical race theory, where we're looking at the context, and for example, feminist legal theory, when you have a murder, if you don't look at the context, you strictly put a murderer in jail, it's different than if you look at the multiple and long-term violence and abuse that a wife has been enduring, and that changes the outcome and the understanding when we look at it from a different lens. Same with critical race theory. When we can look at a scenario and think about the structure of the justice system, or who are the players? What does the bench look like in terms of race and gender, sex? What is the different, not only race, but also class and income level and so forth. So the context really changes how we think about these scenarios. And in business ethics, I kind of give us a framework of 3 levels: the role of society and government and social context, the organization, and then the individual. And I'm sure others do this as teaching ethics. looking at these different different aspects of how learned behavior comes about. You know, the films like Wolf on Wall Street and others that create kind of an understanding that the world of finance, it's okay to break norms and rules, and that's how finance is an exception to maybe our moral, a place where behavior can be not good. And then we can look at the role of the organization and how the structure of an organization incentivizes either ethical or unethical behavior. Maybe in the corporate culture, obviously, like in Enron, we can see the corporate culture being one that encourages competitiveness and unethical behavior because of that culture, a culture of greed and competitiveness. And then also the compensation system. So, you know, how does the compensation, what behavior is that incentivizing? As we think about the organization and how it's structured, so that we're not thinking about necessarily bad apples as much as we're looking at the structure of the apple barrel, right? And so that's important from an organizational point of view. But then also with the individual, I mean, there is ethical ethical requirements at the individual level that play a part in decision making. We can't just blame society and the structure of the organization. The individual also has to be looked at. So the context I can provide through films gives us some rich look at, like in Enron, we can see the societal kind of the machismo, male dominant societal influence. We can see the organization and how it creates competition and pressure to that ends up with unethical actions. And then we can also look at the individual and see what the individual is going through, what the dilemma looks like, and all those things that go into an individual, their upbringing, religious exposure, their family, their friends, where they went to school, all those things impact behavioral decision making. Okay, so kind of like what Wanda did, I thought I'd share some films that I use in my ethics class. And we talk about, we kind of establish business ethics and go through ethical theories. Not a real deep, it's not a philosophy class, but just enough to give them some tools for decision making. And I start off with the corporation, which, and these are business students who are graduating and going off. And so the corporation is a film that is very skeptical of business and its impact on society. And I use it as, it's an extreme look, but it provides a discussion for those that are going into business. And I find that's a good kind of start for us. And then we start studying corporate culture, ethical leadership, and I use that Enron film to talk about that, especially the corporate culture there and the leadership and how that impacts behavior. And then I also show the Milgram experiment, which is very powerful about how the followers, what they're willing to do when they're being told by someone in authority, the length that even if they know the action is unethical, that they will follow. And so kind of putting this idea that as employees, the default is to follow instructions. Then we go on in the class, we talk for a couple of weeks about work, meaning and value of work. the moral rights in the workplace. So, what is work? Why, if people had enough money to live on, why would they continue to work? What are the benefits that work provides you? And then what are some of the negatives, about work? And so it gives us, makes us kind of think about those goals that students have about occupations, and what they plan on doing after graduation, and creating a working environment for they're likely to be managers, and I want them to be able to create a working environment for employees um, that is ethical, and successful. So we talk about legal responsibilities, contractual responsibilities, and moral responsibilities in the workplace. And here I use the film The American Factory, which is a great documentary. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this film specifically. So we'll come back and talk about it. But I use it here in this area of the meaning and value of work. Then I talk about marketing and digital ethics, and this idea that a contract between two parties, a consumer and a retailer, should benefit both parties, right? When we enter into a contract should benefit both parties so that they're acting voluntarily. But at some point, from a marketing standpoint, we're not working voluntarily. And also, of course, the complexity of social media and digital advertising. So we grapple with this, and I use a couple of films, The True Cost and The Great Hack, which explains the Cambridge Analytica situation where personal information related to a number of Facebook's users was provided to Cambridge Analytica and inappropriately, and used to target political messaging during the 2016 election. So we talk about, so The Great Hack really explains the whole thing, which is very complicated. I mean, it's a complicated scenario. And by watching the film, students are able to get the nuances of that predicament, and see the actors. It's a documentary, so they're seeing these actual people, these organizations, and the impact in terms of not just reading about it, but actually seeing those people. And it gives it a much richer, that context. Then we talk about environmental ethics and sustainability. And there's a number of films there that can bring that to heart. International business. Again, I use The American Factory. There's a film called A Decent Factory, and it's an early example of auditing in the supply chain. So actually taking an audit team overseas and looking at the supplier of and here it's Nokia, and they're looking at, who's making their cell phones that they're selling, and looking at the worker conditions, overseas. And so it's a good film, especially because I have a lot of accounting majors who will probably be auditors. And I think it shows a responsible business working with an international supply chain. And then finally, I do talk about the financial industry because my students are generally finance and accounting majors, and the unique pressure that industry can hold on individuals who want to be ethical. So the ability to identify and kind of giving them voice, right, to act on their values. And so The Inside Job and The Big Short are all about the economic collapse in the 2007 to 2009 with the mortgage crisis. So, it's interesting because these students hear about that that recession, but they don't really understand it. So these films often, it's the first time they're really understanding these situations that cause so much damage. And so again, showing, the societal, what's going on in society, what was going on at these organizations and the individuals. And so these are great films for explaining complex, financial systems that resulted in significant issues. So I want to turn to my to this film, The American Factory. It's one that I use in all of my classes. And I should say too, that we have a reasonably kind of surprisingly large international student population from China. So this film is especially interesting because it does kind of illustrate a cultural reconciliation, or trying to work together when you have two different cultures. And so I'm going to play this trailer, and maybe we'll talk about it afterwards. Karen, you have to tell me if you can't see it. You can't see it yet, but
You can't see it yet, but it's connecting to YouTube.
yeah, it's trying.
It's trying. I'm not sure why it's not.
I hear
Here
it
we
coming.
go. It's coming. It's
Let
just
me know if you can hear it and everything.
sure. Here we go.
There it comes.
The sound is not good, Chelsea.
No, I don't know.
Look at your bottom where your gauge is and move it over.
Did you select share computer sound? You might need to do that too.
So you're not hearing it.
No.
What do you think
You
I should
see
do?
it. It's perfect seeing, but the sound isn't on. So
Maybe I
that
can
means
do-
the microphone's not connected somehow.
I'll do closed captioning. Oh, it says.
I don't think that will help. Let me see.
If you try to share the screen again, there at the bottom of the option, there's an option to check a box that says share computer sound. That should fix it.
Ah, okay. So what should it say again?
I think it says share computer sound. Yes, when you select the share screen option, there are two checkboxes. One says share computer sound and the other says
Oh.
up to share for video clip. You can check both of those.
Ah, I see it. I'm so sorry. Okay, we'll try this again here.
If not, I can try to go to mine. Not that it'll work, but I can try.
Well, let's try this. We'll see.
We stand here today.
Here's
with a
good.
plant that's closing, but I'm extremely proud of the people that work in this plant here.
For a year and a half, I didn't have anything.
We lost our home, we lost a vehicle.
I have struggled to get back to middle class again.
This is a historic project that is going to help grow this community, give people jobs, and give a future to your kids and my kids.
Where you sit today used to be a General Motors plant, and now there are over 1,000 employees working here.
Is this a union shop?
It is our desire to not be.
他炸玻璃他必在，他什么卸任什么缺陷。我们的口号
We hope someday to get this good.
他动作比较慢，一直教，一直教。
美国姑娘漂亮的、产出的不能管的。
There have been 11 complaints filed. Some workers claim unsafe working conditions and unfair treatment.
Doing the same thing over and over again, that wears on your body and your soul.
压力是很大，确实是说白了话，任何人在这个地方。
They told me that they had to be here 2 years, away from their family, no extra pay. I've ate at their house, they've ate at my home. We've just bonded.
I'm a riser. 很佩服美国人还能上2班倒，不用像我们想象那样子去为了生活失去很多东西。
那个慢会比工会破坏更厉害。
Now the whole world is watching.
Nothing in America has changed in terms of working people working hard. What changed in America was rich people deciding they wanted to rewrite the rules to take advantage of people.
You never give up on the American dream. To me, that would be un-American.
Okay, so this film, which shows, these it's near Dayton, Ohio, so it's somewhat local. Some of the students know it. Used to be GM, used to be a union shop, and now Fuya, who's a glass making company, starts using the factory and hires some of the, mostly the same people to make automobile glass, and they're very anti-union. They're very focused on productivity, and this creates some friction. So we can talk about cultural values and the differences in US and Chinese cultures. We can talk about workers' rights, what their legal, contractual, and moral rights are in the workplace. We can look at corporate culture, ethical leadership. So it gives us a lot here to talk about in this area of the workplace. And I have them use the frameworks, the ethical frameworks, to analyze, if you look at it from using this framework, that framework, and then looking for ways that the cultures are successful in working together in ways that they're not. And so we can do a whole analysis from the film. The other thing I was going to mention, just that as Karen mentioned, we do have some law and ethics movie nights where usually we give extra credit to watch the film and complete some questions. And this isn't, the students like extra credit, but it gives us also material to really talk about. And Karen, last time she showed her film, her students did a panel, and I'll let her talk about that. I also use it in my asynchronous online course because it's something that they can do and really think about and then have a good discussion board. So it works there. And so it's a way for students who may not like reading to have an alternative assignment. Okay, that's all I have. Let me unshare, and Karen, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Does anybody have any question they want to ask before we go forward? I think one of the things that is so important about what Chelsea talked about is the diversity of topics